Hello and welcome to Buddha and the Coach vlog powered by Soul Performance Academy. I am your host, Dan Mickle. The Buddha and the Coach is a weekly vlog focused on the teachings of the Buddha in a coaching and educational light. The Buddha and the Coach is proud to be sponsored by It's Called Normal Athletics. ICN Athletics makes the extraordinary ordinary through adaptive beach volleyball. Everyone should have the opportunity to enjoy and excel at this sport, and ICN offers the programs and the education to make it normal for adaptive athletes to play on any court. Help them make beach volleyball a court place for everybody. For more information or to make a donation to the 501c3, please visit icnathletics.com. Thanks, and we'll see you in the sand. And thank you to Dave and John and everyone involved at ICN Athletics. It's Called Normal Athletics, doing great things for adaptive beach volleyball and adaptive athletes in general across the globe. All right, this week we are on lesson number 19, which says, just as a mother would protect her only child with her life, even so let one cultivate a boundless love towards all beings. When we bring this into a coaching and education, like the very first thing that pops into my mind is we've all seen the shirts or the memes that say coaches do have favorites. They're the ones that work extra hard and show up early and stay late and do all the intangible things. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And what I think we need to do is be a little bit more careful about the rest of the players, the rest of the teams. And I know that's easier said than done. A lot of times we have situations with other players on the team that we just don't have that relationship, whether it's just a quirky attitude that we can't connect with, or if there's outside forces like parents or friends or something else that's causing kind of that disconnect with those players. But I think for teams to be really successful in the long run, that's something we have to look at. And the question becomes, how do we do that? And I'm reminded of a story from my really good friend John. Actually, John from ICN Athletics tells a story about when he was coaching some beach volleyball camps. And there was always this one player who just didn't want to be there. It was obvious that his parents were kind of just dropping him off to kind of babysit over the summer, and kid really wasn't into the sport. And one of the things that John did was, instead of forcing this kid, hey, you're here, you got to do these drills and skills, kind of tried to figure out what could he do to make it enjoyable for the kid. And what he found out was the kid was really social and kind of liked being there but wanted to help. So John found really creative ways to incorporate him, whether it was him helping start a drill or counting, or doing the time and the stopwatch to help with things. And one of the other things was that he helped hand out like the icy pops during breaks and helped get the drinks. And the kid seemed to really enjoy doing that. And matter of fact, the kid would come back for multiple years just to do that. And I think that's something that we have to look at as coaches. We are always going to have those players that don't have the same buy-in as the others. So how do you work with the players that have the super buy-in? They're looking for the scholarship, they're looking for the national championship, they're looking for the really competitive edge. And then how do you incorporate the players that mom and dad played, so they signed me up, or I have to do this, or I'm just kind of here, I'm really not into it. And I think too many times we gloss over those players. We try to find the easy route. Well, we'll make them a manager, or we're just going to put them in the back of the court, and and I think that really does a disservice to everyone. It does a disservice, obviously, to that player because they're not getting attention. And while they may not need or want your sport-specific attention, it's highly likely, highly possible that they need your emotional attention. That this would be a great chance for you to mentor someone and help them out in life skills. And I think we miss that opportunity. It affects the rest of your team because maybe they're emotionally attached to it. That I think that's one aspect of the game that we don't think about too much, is how do the decisions that we make and things that we do affect our team emotionally. So maybe they're seeing that kid sit there and not doing much, and it's affecting them. Either they're getting angry because the kid's wasting coach's time, or maybe they feel some empathy or sadness because They know that the kid's just there because he has to be there. He doesn't really want to be there, so they kind of feel a little sad. And that in turn is something that goes into the whole package of what works with our team and what works with our players. And then obviously it affects you as a coach. Do you feel that you're not doing your job because you're not connecting with that player? Or are you angry because you feel like that kid's wasting your time or valuable resources that could be put towards other players or other things that could help grow and make your team, more competitive? But I think if you learn how to use and adapt your training to include those players in some way, I think everyone kind of wins. But again, I think a lot of times we just kind of brush it off. So can you make that player more of a coach or more of a manager that will help you with things and get them playing times when they want it? And I guess first that's where it has to start. You have to have that sit down and honest talk and find out, hey, what do you want to do? And I suggest you do this with your whole team. Especially travel teams, when we're forming these teams, there might be different reasons why players decide to play for you. And it can be really hard if half your team wants to win a championship and the other half is just there to stay in shape for another sport. So I think you have to have that talk and come to some sort of agreement of what is the actual makeup of this team. What is the major goal? Are we going for these championships? Are we going to these major national events? Or are we going to stay local and we just want to be really competitive locally and we want to stay in shape for a high school season or for another sport? And I think too many times we just dive into it. We think, well, the kids accepted our offer, kids that are coming into this program, regardless of the sport, whether it's basketball, all-star baseball, travel ball, or volleyball. The kids are coming into your club or your team, so you just think that they are going to all have the same makeup. Maybe your club or your team has always been known as the big national competing club or team, and that you travel a lot, so you just automatically assume that that's why everyone's coming to you. You don't think that, well, maybe they're coming to you because of price, because of location, or what happens a lot is maybe because they're best friends playing on that team. And we just assume that, well, since they signed up for a team, they know what they're getting. But that's not always the case. They don't always know what they're getting. So I think when we start out each year or each season, we have to have that talk. Even at the college level, we have to have that talk. Are you, going to be in the weight room 5 days a week? Or are you looking at being in the weight room 3 days a week? Because it's just too much. And that'll affect what your expectations are. And we'll talk about expectations, I'm sure, on another lesson and the dangers of expectations. But I think this is the first step of where we fail, or sometimes there's a disconnect. We just automatically assume that because someone has come into our program that they understand fully what the concept is of the program or the team, and they buy into it. It's not to say that they can't buy into it. It's just sometimes they just don't know what they're getting into. Most club sports, you go and have these tryouts with hundreds of other kids. You don't get that time to sit down with the coach and really learn about the coach. You maybe have a 5-10 minute meet and greet. And again, that's another topic for another time about how maybe we can address that. But to stay on point with lesson 19 here is, how do we show our care and our love for those players that maybe aren't buying completely into our system? And we spend and focus all our time on the top tier, but there can be a ton of value on those that are still working towards the top tier, or maybe don't even want to be the top tier. There are players that are fine being that bench player, that 11th player, that 12th man, whatever your sport is. But that still doesn't mean that you can't care, you can't nurture them, you can't work with them. But you need to find that starting point. You need to find what they're actually looking for. And we can't just jump in and say, okay, well, you're on an elite team, so you should be ready to go for elite. Sometimes you have to adjust that. And what happens is you'll find that those players are often the players that help keep the glue. They're the glue of the team, or help the team stay together while you're going through this journey, because the top tier players or the elite players on your team are so stressed out about maybe getting college looks or playing at top level, getting on high performance teams, or just the actual work of performing. It's those players that are coming in just to stay in shape, just to have fun, still work hard and still buying what you're doing, but they're the ones that keep it all together because they don't have the same stress or, the same distractions that your top players might have. And if you don't show them the care and show them the love, you may not get that from the player. So the challenge, I think, for all of us is, how do we work with that? So let's just go through a couple steps of what I think we can do. First, like I said, is we have to figure out where everyone's at. So the very first thing you need to do is have that meeting or that sit down with your team and with the individuals. Just find out, what are your expectations? What do you want from this team? Are you looking for the elite status, or are you looking for something special that this team or this organization brings, or are you just looking to stay in shape, stay active, stay playing the sport, have fun, play with your friends? That's a big one. Again, all those are valid, and I have no problem with any of those, but I think we just need to know where those players are at. So that's step one. Step two is, once you see the makeup, and let's say for this example, you have a roster of 10 and 8 of them are all in full elite. We want to win a championship. We want to go to these big national events. But you have 2 that are like, well, I just want to play with my friend. I want to have some fun. How do we modify that? And step number 2 is, once we figure that out, is then how do we make that plan? And I think what we need to do is, it's a different game plan, right? While we're setting up what our athlete plan is for the season, and we're setting out the goals for those 8 that are the top tier players, it's, hey, this is the physicality, this is what we want to get you better at. And you talk about the skills and the tactics. For those bottom 2, I think it is, how can you bring more value to the team? We already value as a player, but how can we get the most out of your skill set, or where your mindset is, to be more for a team? Maybe you focus some of the games, some of the drills around them. Let them run it. Let them carry some of the emotional stuff. Maybe your feedback to them is then also different. And that's kind of step 3, is, what do you look at your feedback? So when you're getting really technical with those top players, maybe you're looking more big picture with those bottom 2, talking about how they can be leaders, or how they can help drive the team to where you want it to be. So maybe you're not spending so much time talking about technique. Now, again, we're not saying that you're not going to teach and get those players better at your sport, or at, the class that you're teaching, or the instrument that they're learning. We still want to see growth in that area. But maybe what we want to see is more growth in the soft skills. And I'm not a huge fan of saying soft skills, but because everyone kind of knows, what that entails, I'm going to use it in this example. But maybe you work with them on the leadership. Maybe you work with them on communication. And then you also incorporate them more on that aspect of the training. So while you're focusing maybe on arm swing or speed with the top 8 players who are all in ready for that championship, you can use those bottom 2s to help you develop the cues, help you be your set of eyes, maybe help give you feedback to give the other players. And by giving them attention, they're going to feel a much bigger part of the team and have a lot more buy-in in that situation. And then step number 4 is, help them see where to go next. Because what happens when they lose you, if you take this time and you help to show them just as much attention, again, maybe in a different area than you do for your top players, and they're moving on, another coach may not have that same patience, or may not have that same desire. So step number 4 is kind of preparing the players for that. Okay, this is how you present it to your next coach, or this is how you present it to your next teacher. This is the value that I can bring your team, and this is what I'm looking for. Show them how to bring that out and explain that, so others can see what you saw and what you worked on that may not be directly translated to your sport, or what people see on the court and the wins and the losses, but you can help them communicate and be an advocate basically for themselves on how to show the value that they bring. And I think those 4 steps are how we end up showing the love for everyone on the team. And again, I think a lot of us, and I've been guilty of it too, everything that we talk about on this vlog, trust me, I've been through both sides of it, and I still have to work really hard on all of it. And this is one area that I think I do need to work a lot more on, is incorporating those bottom players so I can show love to everyone on the team and not looking at them as a burden or trying to figure out, oh, what am I going to do with this player? They're, you'll hear the term drill killer and all this stuff. If you're saying a player is a drill killer, then you have to figure out how to modify your drill to help them grow. Because that's what we are, we're a coach. I think too many times we see that, oh, that person's a drill killer, and they'll just avoid it, or they'll put them in situations where it'll help the drill go more smoothly, but there's no growth from that player. And how's that showing love to that player? You're going to modify your drill so that it's easier for you and the rest of the team versus actually coaching and actually trying to help that player. And we'll hear a lot of times we'll have players say, oh, I love taking those bottom teams, the second, third, fourth, fifth teams, not the top teams, because I love working with that player. The problem is, it's easy to do when you're working with a whole team like that. It's a lot harder when you have a mixture of that team. And you have to recognize that you have a mixture. You almost always have a mixture. I guarantee if you're coaching right now and you go down your roster, you probably have a mixture where you have the top players that are all in, that they will do everything. They're going to be in the weight room. They're going to watch film. They're going to train 7 days a week. And then you're going to have one or two that are there like, oh, I want to get better, but I also am involved in another sport. I'm involved in theater. I'm involved in music. Are you willing to toss that player away just because it's going to make it harder? It's going to make it harder for you to plan your practices. It's going to make it harder for you to run your practices. Or are you going to show them the same love that you show your top players so that they can also grow? Because chances are you knew what you were getting into when you offered a spot to that player accepted. You knew that they were doing a lot of other things. And this is also where I'd like to see clubs and organizations do better. This should be a question on every registration. When you're filling out what is your position, how long have you played, do you want to play on our national team or our local or our regional team? There should be a question on there on what are your expectations. Well, I want to stay in shape for basketball. And here's where we got to be careful. A lot of players won't put anything on there if you're asked that because they're afraid that they're not going to make the team. Well, they know that I'm in band or they know that I'm in the theater, so they're not even going to. We need to talk about that. How can we work on that? It's crazy to me. At the college level, we have players that do a million things. There's organizations, there's leadership, there's externships, there's a million things going on. And we adapt to it. We know that players might not make every practice. I'm not going to punish a player because they have a lab. I'm not going to punish a player because they have an externship. Oh, you couldn't make the practice before a match. You're sitting out the first set, or you're sitting out the first game, or the first couple minutes. We have to also look at that in our youth and club culture. Because I think we're turning away a lot of kids. We're making a lot of players unhappy because we don't want to work with it. Is it ideal? No, but what are we actually in this for? If it's to grow players and make players better, then we need to be able to work around that. We need to work around your players' basketball schedule if they're playing volleyball, or their track schedule, or their football schedule if they're wrestling. When we're looking at all the conflicts, sure, it's going to be rough. And obviously, if the player says, well, I've got play practice every weekend and all your events are weekends, I get that. But if there's going to be conflicts once a week, once every month, should that hurt those players? Are we going to show the same love to that player that we're showing to the player that's going to be there every single practice, every single minute? Don't those players that have other things going on also bring value, and shouldn't they receive the same commitment from us as coaches, teachers, and leaders that everyone gets? But I think often we kind of dismiss those players. It's an easy out for us. Well, you're not getting playing time because you're not at practice because you've got musical practice. Again, I get that sometimes that does affect. If you have one player that's missing 4 practices a week and only practiced 1, I get that that affects the rest of the team. But that doesn't mean that we still can't coach them and still work with them in that framework to make them the best. I think the problem is too many times we just push it off. Okay, well, we're just going to go on autopilot, cruise control, and let whatever happens. Versus how can I modify my training, my practices, so that they're getting the most of it? Maybe I go light in the beginning of practice because I know that they're coming late, and then we go heavy so that they get a value. Versus I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm sorry you missed it. And that's how we have to show love towards all beings on our team. Love to hear your comments. So have a little bit of discussion down here in the comments. Hit like, love. I don't know which corner any of this stuff's on, but like our videos, share, subscribe. Let's get the word out. Let's get more of a population talking about this. How do you love everyone on your team? And I'm not just talking about, the hugging and, hey, it's great to have you part of the team. I'm talking about how do you show them love in your practice planning, in your game planning for everyone? How do you get them involved? Reach out to us, Dan@danmickle.com, info@soulperformanceacademy.com. You can reach me across all social media at RealDanMickle. Make sure you check out some of the TikTok videos that I'm now doing. Our podcasts, the Mental Cast and Proper Atmosphere podcast across all podcast platforms, wherever you listen to, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Pandora, Spotify, they're all on there. And you can also reach Soul at 717 Soul across all social media. But again, the reason I do this is I want to have these interactions. I want to have these discussions and open it up. So please, interact, share, get this out to your co-workers, your co-coaches, your friends, your family, everyone. Peace, much love, don't suck, and we'll see you next week for Lesson 20, and this is a wrap for Lesson 19. Just as a mother would protect her only child with her life, even so let one cultivate a boundless love towards all beings, the Buddha.